السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحيي الجميع حضوركم للجلسة الخاصة في الهندسة الطبية والكلينيكية ضمن المؤتمر الدولي للتشغيل والصيانة. هذه الجلسة الخاصة بالهندسة الطبية هي امتداد للمؤتمر الدولي للهندسة الطبية والكلينيكية في الدول العربية، واللي تم إقامتها بدأنا في عام 2010. أول دورة كانت أو أول مؤتمر كان بالرياض في الانتركونتيننتال، وثاني مؤتمر كان في بيروت في فندق حبتور، ثالث مؤتمر كان في دبي في الأتلانتس هوتيل، وبعدين انتقلنا إلى القاهرة، والعام الماضي كانت في دبي. المفترض نكون في عندنا مؤتمر الهندسة الطبية والكلينيكية في الدول العربية بالرياض، لكن عشان أزمة كورونا قلنا ان نحن نسوي على الاقل جلسه واحده ضمن مؤتمر التشغيل والصيانه. وهذه الجلسه طبعا هي جلسه خاصه بالهندسه الطبيه، واحنا يعني يشاركنا اليوم 4 خبراء من من انحاء العالم. وعندنا الدكتور بنسنج وانغ من امريكا، والمهندس بسام طبشوري من بيروت، والمهندس مالك الحسيني من دبي، والمهندس رامناث من الهند. وكل واحد فيهم الحمد لله يكونوا يعني خبراء عندهم لا يقل عن 25 إلى 30 سنة خبرة في مجال الهندسة الطبية. وحضوركم في هذه الفعالية مهم جدا. كما تعلموا أن الآن في السعودية وفي الشرق الأوسط تقريبا في المنطقة كلها ما عندنا فعاليات في هذا التخصص. كان في الأرب هيلث مؤتمر الهندسة الطبية وتوقف من سنين، وكذلك في الرياض كان عندنا إحنا مؤتمر الهندسة الطبية تحت مظلة وزارة الصحة في المؤتمر أو المعرض الصحي السعودي، ومع الأسف كذلك هذا توقف لها 2 سنين. والآن زي ما تشوفوا ما عندنا فعاليات أو مؤتمرات في هذا التخصص في المملكة. فحضوركم مهم جدا في هذا، لأنه هذا حضوركم هو تشجيع لنا وتشجيع للمنظمين أنهم يقدموا لكم المؤتمرات والفعاليات العلمية والورش العمل. وكذلك أنا أعتقد عدم استمرارية المؤتمر بدبي هو لقلة الحضور وعدم المشاركة والفعالية من قبل المختصين في هذا التخصص. على كل حال نحن نرحب بكم جميعا، ونرحب بجميع المتحدثين في هذه الجلسة، ونرجو أن نتمنى أن يكون هذه الجلسة تكون مفيدة جدا. هي مدتها ساعة زمان، وعندنا ثلاثة برزنتيشن أوراق عمل. طبعا وهذه الجلسة هي عبارة عن إدارة وصيانة الأجهزة الطبية وأصول الهندسة الطبية كذلك. فعندنا 4 متحدثين. الدكتور بنسنج وانغ مشترك مع المهندس بسام طبشوري في الورقة الأولى، وبعد كده حيكون البرزنتيشن the first session or first presentation. First of all, I would like to welcome everybody. I would like to welcome our guest speakers as well the audience for this session, especially for biomedical engineering. Our first presentation is going to be regarding outsourcing medical equipment services, advantages and disadvantages. نتكلم عن الاستعانة بمصادر خارجية لخدمة المعدات الطبية. اللي قدمها المهندس بسام طبشوري هو معنا اليوم. طيب
Please let me know if you want me to start. This is Malik speaking. Okay, let me do that. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim, for the introduction. In the first talk, we are changing the sequence of the speaker. This is Malek El Husseini, and my talk today will be around optimizing medical technology through using the lifecycle asset management. And we would like to make the agenda. I will be doing an introduction at the start. I will be describing the asset management versus asset maintenance. What's the difference? Then later on, what it entails, the program for asset management, and a comparison of the life cycle asset management LCCA versus net present value. And I will list the indicators for asset management program, and then a conclusion. So this is the agenda, which is what I would like to say, the world of the medical devices is huge. So it's a universe by itself. It's increasing day after day. So when we talk about asset management, we're talking not about a small number of equipments that will be in the medical equipments in the hospital. So what we mean by asset management program, in principle, what we want is to measure a specification of how the assets will perform. And based on that one, we will put the indicators. So in asset management, usually in the terms, what we're talking about, how we can manage or reduce the cost associated to the assets, how we can optimize or maximize the quality of the service that we provide, and integrate that with an important elements, which is the well-being of the patients. And of course, in a very well-maintained program or environment. So as a descriptions of how we maintain a good assets is talking about the cost related to the assets, the quality of the maintenance, and the well-being of the total environments of the patient. So when we say asset management, we don't mean by that asset maintenance, because the asset maintenance is the one subset of an asset management. Asset management is the bigger concepts that englobe the asset maintenance itself. So usually an asset management programs cover the justification of needs to call and buy the equipment, the selections, then the acceptance, doing the training for the staff, servicing through the maintenance team, and then later on disposing or replacing the equipment by another piece of equipment. And usually the life cycle of the asset management, it's a bigger job that in cover all the aspects of the hospital itself. Start with the strategic planning, the objectives of acquiring an assets, subset and subsidized, or I would say supported by the technology, health technology assessment group that give them the indication in the usage of the technology. Then we do the procurements. And after we're doing the installation and acceptance, we do the clinical usage, and then we do the maintenance and repair. And once it's due for obsolescence, we replace. Bear in mind that will also, of course, take in the quality assurance and the risk management of during the clinical usage and the maintenance and repair of the asset itself. So usually the technology life cycle starts from an innovation phase where they have early usage or early diffusion, and later on a bigger diffusion of the application of the technology, and later stage an obsolescence, whether it's a technological obsolescence or maintenance obsolescence. And that diagrams had been introduced in 1993 and still valid as of how the assets on the life cycle of the assets behave. The purpose of an asset management program is to ensure that the equipment is intended for its usage and suitable. It is understood by the users, it's safe and serviceable, and meet the quality standards and the safety requirements, and satisfy only all of the above being a cost-effective manners of acquisition. Usually, when we say medical equipment asset management as a definition, we're talking about an intelligent use of the manpower, the equipment, and the money, and making the rational decisions on acquiring the technology and implementing those decisions. And then when we talk about the challenges of an asset management program, is really how to quantify the value of the technology management activities first gaining the support of the management and the senior management in terms of doing the acquisition, and how to do that in terms of collecting the data and reporting it in a meaningful way. The activities basically are two activities when we do asset management, the procurement and the maintenance. At the procurement level, usually it's required relatively less manpower, but politically difficult to navigate to acquire, because we know, for example, someone like the users or the physician sometimes has an influence, sometimes the senior administration, and sometimes the biomed. The maintenance is a politically straightforward, but it consumes lots of energy and manpower and resources. The procurement decisions, it could be a rent, lease, purchase, purchasing method, it could be very different one, like the GPO groups, which is very trendy nowadays. And usually we do look at it at the budget and the payment terms and the life cycle cost analysis and the maintenance itself, whether it's easy or not. This is a typical showing a life cycle asset management regarding in the top we see like this is the total cost of the equipment as a capital equipment. But that's not the total cost that we usually look at it when we evaluate a medical equipment. We look at over the years, the maintenance, the facility cost, the disposable, and the total value, which comes to a net present value. So there is a big difference between comparing a capital cost on just the equipment itself versus the full net present value of the equipment. And usually we consider this value to compare equipment A to equipment B. So the asset management program or task require receiving the equipment, staging it, looking at architectural design and construction coordination in case if it's a major equipment, doing the installation, pre-commissioning inspections, doing the equipment management system through the software, warranty management and monitoring, doing the service contracts, training the staff and the users on the equipments and the maintenance staff in terms of doing the biomedical engineering service. And after all, looking at the risk management and the quality assurance. And I believe today, when we look at asset management, we're talking more about risk management objectives rather than maintenance. So when we acquire new activities, usually we do the inventory and information and tagging the equipment, and we do the inspections. Basically, we look at the function, the documentation, the spare parts, the terms of purchasing equipment, and the warranty monitoring, whether it could be 1 year, 3 years, or not. And later stage to do the service training for the biomedical engineering or outsourcing the maintenance to someone else. This is a chart showing the total cost of ownership versus the real equipment. If you look at the equipment, this is a radiology equipment, which their cost compared to the total cost is only 23% versus 77% looking after the other aspects of doing the maintenance and the other components that will complete the total cost of ownership. So managing assets is more related to risk, and this is which is the role of the real biomedical management services nowadays is more to manage the risks rather than to do real only day-to-day maintenance. And of course, managing risk will require to match the resources with the priority of the hospital and the biomedical engineering service. And usually we assess the clinical risk where we classify the equipment high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And basically those factors determine the clinical risk, like the device function, the clinical application, which is invasive or not, the failure history, the incident reports, and all of this makes the clinical classification of the equipment. Medical equipment, usually management services result in quantifying the equipment downtime, identifying and reduce the device reliability, and identify all the reporting and all the costs related to this service. We have certain performance indicator for an equipment management system, which is usually we calculate them like the uptime, downtime, mean time between failures, life cycle cost analysis, and some other indicators depending on the usage for the hospitals and for the departments. When main activity of the asset maintenance program or management, we look at the preventive maintenance, corrective maintenance, safety hazards and recall, and training, whether for the staff or the biomedical engineer. So usually the objectives of a project and asset management programs is to maximize the equipment uptime and the return on investments, minimize the risk to the patient, staff, and environments, and optimize the cost effectiveness of those investments related to the equipment. And as a conclusion, usually the medical asset can be managed to do proper planning and deciding the procurements on how to buy it and do the full management in appropriate way. As a conclusion and a key indicator for the survival of a program, what we need to do is really more management and less maintenance, and to manage the risks and access the information to ability to interpret that, really how to contain the cost, manage the risk, and add value to existing services, and overall our ability to adapt to changing in the circumstances, like nowadays when we see the issues of COVID-19 and how to impact the working inside the hospital. So the game has changed, and today we used to talk about one single person deciding about how to acquire equipment. Today we have the finance at the level of the executives, we have the service people, and we have the equipment at the clinical department. So it's a common decision between all the parties in order to come to select equipment and use equipment. As a conclusion, what I would like to say, the decision-making process for the asset management program, it entails the technology assessment, doing the technology planning properly, doing a proper acquisition, and at the end to do management. So that's englobing the total value of how to do an asset management program in an appropriate way in the hospital setups. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Engineer Malik. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for your presentation. I believe we'll go to the second speaker, and we'll take your questions after the end of the session. That maybe will be more better for us to manage the timing in this session. الأخوة الحضور، لو عندكم أي أسئلة ممكن ترسلوها لنا، وإحنا عند نهاية الجلسة هذه إن شاء الله حنعرضها للمتحدثين ونجاوب على أسئلتكم. وإحنا معنا كذلك الدكتور والأستاذ أحمد البراك، وحيناقشنا ويشاركنا في مناقشة إن شاء الله مع نهاية هذه الجلسة بإذن الله تعالى. ننتقل الآن. We'll go now for the second presentation with Mr. Engineer Bassam Tabshouri. المهندس بسام من إدارة التكنولوجيا والرعاية الصحية، وهو مدير قسم الهندسة الطبية في المركز الطبي في الجامعة الأمريكية ببيروت، ومؤسس جمعية الرعاية الصحية. His presentation is going to be regarding outsourcing medical equipment services, advantages and disadvantages، اللي هي الاستعانة بمصادر خارجية لخدمة وصيانة المعدات الطبية من المزايا والعيوب. Engineer Bassam, please.
Good morning. I would like to thank Tech for this opportunity of addressing this distinguished audience. My presentation would be about outsourcing medical equipment services, advantages and disadvantages. And my thanks go to my dear friend, Dr. Binseng Wang, with whom we have prepared this presentation. Okay. I'll start with my presentation. So I would be talking about four major axes. What is CE outsourcing, and then how to manage it, including service level agreements, the KPIs, discussion conclusions. Then I will do a comparison of the main service models. And finally, we'll talk about the secrets of good CE outsourcing and how to achieve success in it. So what is outsourcing? Who provides outsourcing? And why should we go into CE outsourcing? What is it? If we go into it, it will involve several components, including the staff. And the staff can be the employees of the outsourcing company, but sometimes it could be the hospital employees or a mixture. In terms of infrastructure, it is provided by the hospital. As for the other physical resources, it can be provided by the outsourcing company, but sometimes it could be a mixture. And the financial resources are fully provided by the hospital, but managed by the outsourcing company. In terms of management, the staff, finances, performance, etc., it is under the full responsibility of the outsourcing company. As for the training of users and maintainers, it is the responsibility of the manufacturer distributors. In very rare cases, the outsourcing company provides some user refresher training, but this is an area for consideration in our region, especially with the JCI requirements. As for the documentation, the manuals should be provided by the manufacturer's distributors, and the outsourcing company provides policies and procedures and generates service records. The records and the inventory database will be transferred to the hospital when the outsourcing company leaves. So who are the providers and what are the different models? It can be an OEM outsourcing, multi-vendor servicing, where the outsourcing company is an OEM and which may provide a mixture of hospital-based staff and traveling staff. Examples of such companies are GE and Philips. It can be an independent service organization, independent from any OEM, examples Trimadex, Compass, and Sodexo. And the mixed model, where the company is an OEM that hires another company to share responsibilities, example Siemens. And it can be only management, where the outsourcing company deploys and manages hospital employees, example Trimadex, Sodexo. So why should we go into CE outsourcing? It is a good alternative to the traditional in-house supported by OEM and third party for the following reasons. It can reduce costs, equipment rental costs, management oversight burden. It can insure against expense fluctuations. It is like you buying an insurance policy for yourself. It can fill in gaps of internal expertise and the problems of recruitment and retention. And it can improve the quality, patient satisfaction, and compliance with regulations and or accreditation standards. Now, to do it properly, we need proper service level agreements. And let's take some examples. If we look at mission critical equipment like CT, MRI, surgical robot lab, the time coverage can be, for example, from 6 till 20 and non-working days, 24 hours on call. And we can say that it would be full for items 1, 2, 3 and pass through for contracts for items 4, 5, 6. And surely there should be exclusions like the flat panel detectors, etc., which are beyond abuse and force majeure. And for non-mission critical, the timing would be different and the non-working days on call also different. And similarly, it can be full for items XXX, labor only for YYY, and pass through contracts for items ZZZ. And we have exclusions on the items. In terms of non-critical biomedical equipment, it is a similar thing, and part of the exclusions, for example, like parts for flexible endoscopes, and non-mission critical lab equipment, also from 6, for example, till 18, and during non-work days from 8 till 20, and exclusion, for example, calibration reagents. So all of these items should be agreed upon and negotiated with the service provider. Another KPI is the uptime for the critical mission equipment, for example, 90% for CT MRI, 85% for the robots, lasers, 95% for the chemistry analyzers. And for the scheduled PM, it should be 100% for critical equipment, 90% for non-critical equipment. And definitely with these, there should be incentives and penalties, and all of these are negotiated and agreed upon. And the repair time response, for example, less than 15 minutes for critical equipment, less than 60 minutes for non-critical equipment. As for the completion time, it will really depend on the situation and the availability of spare parts. And together with it, we should have incentives and penalties. And finally, the issue of escalation with incentive and penalties, and it will depend on the timing on the local situation. Now, let's look into in-house services. In-house is a very good model if we can recruit and retain good staff, if we have necessary resources, budgets for parts and training, and if there is a good strong support from the senior leadership, and the clinical engineers have an active role in proper health technology management. The outsourcing, on the other hand, can be very advantageous if it is properly selected and managed, especially for hospitals who have limited resources and are located far from metropolitan areas. It adds competition to the existing service providers and lowers the costs and enhances quality. These companies can offer the CE professionals better career growth opportunity, and the professionals, clinical engineers, may join these companies for better career growth opportunity. On the other hand, if it is poorly managed, the outsourcing puts the hospital at a high risk of financial and operational loss, clinical staff and patient dissatisfaction, potential risk of losing license or accreditation. Can increase the costs, extra charges, and it can increase cost fluctuations if you have poor supply chain support. It can decrease the efficiency due to technically incompetent staff or those without customer service skills, which is a very important point, and it can add a burden to the management oversight. It can decrease patient satisfaction, you have canceled appointments, and it can cause complaints from clinicians and patient incidents. Comparison of the main service models, in-house, OEM, ISO. So in terms of staff recruitment retention, in-house, we have limited career growth. OEM outsource, good career growth, but lots of travel. It is the best career growth, but limited travel for the ISO. Staff competency, in-house, uneven. OEM, best for own products, uneven for others. ISO, it is good if large training investment. Service documentation, the in-house, limited access. OEM, best for their products, uneven for others. ISO, it is good if they have large bargaining power. In terms of replacement parts, in-house, it is limited. OEM, best for their own products, uneven for others. ISO, uneven, but if they have good bargaining power, it can be really good. Response time, in-house is best. OEM is best for products. ISO, best for products supported by on-site. Effectiveness, in-house, uneven. OEM, outsourced, best for own products, uneven for others. ISO, good if large training investment. And similarly for the other items, I will not go over them in detail. So what are the secrets of CE outstanding success? So there are three perspectives that need to be colliding to have a win. So in terms of the service provider, they should have a solid CE program. They should have competent and motivated staff. They should have access to manuals, software, and parts, good benchmarking, solid remote support, and strong bargaining power, and good customer focus. If you are on the hospital side perspective, it should be a partnership attitude. There should be cultural match. It should be one win, not the lowest cost, good benchmarking, focus on the outcomes, and it should be along a long-term vision. So if we look at the left side and the cost components, we have the staff, the service contracts, third-party contracts, parts, and miscellaneous. If it is done properly, the outsourcing, the staff is the same. The service contracts should be reduced, the third party should be reduced, the parts should be reduced. So it should leave a margin for profits and savings, profit for the ISO and savings for the hospital. This is the best case scenario and the properly done outsourcing. Conclusion. CE outsourcing is different from third-party service. CE outsourcing has its own niche. It can be very good under certain circumstances if it is well managed using proper negotiated service level agreements. Poorly managed clinical engineering outsourcing can be costly and risky to patients and clinical professionals. CE outsourcing can help to balance against OEM service by creating competition. These are our contact details. So please contact us for any questions, comments, suggestions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Bassam. Your topic is very interesting and it's very useful, especially for the director of the Biomedical Engineering Department in hospitals. But unfortunately, we couldn't hear you because your voice was not clear at all. I believe because there are rain in the storm in the Lebanon. نعتذر بالنيابة عن المهندس بسام على الصوت. في بيروت، هو من يكلمنا من بيروت، والظاهر عندهم اعاصير وعندهم امطار غزيره مما ضعف عندهم النت. نعتذر نيابه عن المهندس بسام. Okay, well, I think as we agreed that we're going to take your questions after the last session. Now we're going to go for the last session from with engineer Sundaram Ramnath. He's managing director of the Healthtech 360 training center, and he was a regional manager for the ICRI for a long time for the Middle East. The presentation for engineer Ramnath is about artificial intelligence and its impact on the healthcare. Mr. Ram, please, the mic with you. Thank you.
Yeah, just
بالنسبة للحضور، لو عندكم أي أسئلة ممكن تطرحوها ترسلوها لنا إن شاء الله بعد نهاية هذه الجلسة أو هذه المحاضرة. نستعرض أسئلتكم ونحاول نجاوب عليها من خلال الأساتذة الدكاترة الموجودين معنا. Yes, Ram, please.
Yes. Can you hear me clearly now? My presentation, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah.
Yes, Ram, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. My presentation is on one of the new exciting areas of biomedical engineering, clinical engineering, and medicine, which is called artificial intelligence, which is making huge impact on healthcare and probably is likely to shape the destiny of most of the engineers in the next 5 to 10 years. I would suggest that engineers take a look at this because it's going to change and completely revolutionize your jobs. Just like any new science, it has got its own dictionary, it has got its own terminologies, and I do believe that these terminologies are increasingly becoming common in this time and age. So what is artificial intelligence? To separate it from real intelligence, it's a machine or a computer or a device that mimics human intelligence. So this machine is able to do almost all the functions that a human being can do, probably in some cases more efficiently, without any tiredness, without any side effects, and so on. So you will come across terminologies such as machine learning, which is what the machines learn what we do. They learn the patterns, they learn the diagnosis, they learn everything and spew out the results. Deep learning is something where it's more sophisticated than machine learning. It learns very deep. It actually mimics completely diagnostics. A neural network is a set of multiple calculations that a machine can do in order to throw up the right diagnosis. To give you an indication today, in most of the modern CT scanners, by the time you finish the scan, the CT scanner will give you 6 or 7 possible diagnostics, which the clinician can use to choose the right one. So as you might expect, this new science, which has basically been in research for the last 7 to 10 years, has a huge impact on many different aspects of healthcare. The primary impact is on areas which are diabetes care, heart disease, cancer, neurological disease, and infectious diseases. To give an indication, in the case of diabetes, we have a lot of data which we collect through personal devices, whether it's a glucometer, whether it's blood pressure equipment. What artificial intelligence does is to combine all of these data and gives you a predictive analysis of how your disease is progressing and what to do in order to get control of the disease. In the case of heart disease, it combines data from intensive care units. It combines data from, sometimes we do CT, cardiac CT, or cardiac MRI, or cardiac nuclear medicine, and throws up meaningful results and meaningful diagnosis, as well as trends, so that the physician can act on it and decide what to do next in a more intelligent and a more perceptive manner than before. In the case of cancer, it combines results of diagnostics, lab, any other results, and throws up meaningful suggestions and ideas for therapy. In the case of neurological diseases, it combines results from CT scan, nuclear medicine, lab, MRI, and so on, and throws up diagnosis and catches sometimes tumors and other ailments that physicians often miss. In the case of infectious diseases like COVID and so on, what it does is it can do mass population screening so that the data can be filtered and diseases can be identified at a very early stage. I want to go a little bit more into details. There are many companies doing research on this. You can see the orange initiative. I suggest that you can have a look at their web pages. In medical diagnosis, what machine learning and deep learning are doing are using a technology called computer vision engineering. What it does is it analyzes all the grayscale images that we take, goes pixel by pixel, does the analysis, and finally, what it does is it gives the best possible diagnosis. It has been proven that the diagnostics can almost match a radiologist in the efficiency of his functioning. And what is more, it's able to pick up certain trends and image points which even radiologists find it difficult to pick up. All of us have been at the receiving end of coronavirus for the last 12 months or so, 8-9 months. Now today what's happening is there are new AI-based technologies that combine lab data, that combine imaging data, that combine trends, that combine population dynamics, that combine a whole lot of other features so that epidemics can be predicted. As you might have guessed, while this was not very effective so far in the coronavirus, in the next epidemic, wherever it happens, anywhere in the world, this will be extremely important. And if you can see that the data is collected from many different sources, satellites, real-time imaging, website information, and so on, and neural networks collate this information and predict everything from malaria outbreaks to chronic infectious diseases. As you can guess, this is probably going to be one of the most important areas of growth in the next 10 years. Now, we all find that identifying disease in areas, especially in some rare diseases and so on, are very hard to diagnose. So today, we have computers like IBM Watson, which has got a genomics package, which can identify diseases at a very, very early stage in your life. And perhaps you can take corrective action before even the disease is perceived to be active in an individual. This can include from cancers or other genetic diseases, so that, this is called cognitive computing. And this is going to become a very, very critical area in predictive medicine and preventive medicine in the future. Again, there are a few companies. I would suggest you refer to the web pages, which is IBM Watson and Berg, are both of them doing a lot of interesting work in this area. These are the companies that you'll hear in the future contributing to the advancement of medicine. All of us are now familiar with electronic health records. Now, this has become part and parcel of the hospital today. But now we're going one step further. We're doing what's called smart records. Smart records is from the electronic health records, to identify trends, identify documentation, classification, and so on. And believe it or not, they are designing software to read doctors' handwriting. Okay, so this is going to become the next frontier of mining all the data in the various health records in your institutions, and then combining it into meaningful analysis so that the clinical treatment at the institutions can be significantly improved. Now, all of us in many areas, cancer is a deadly disease, but accuracy of radiotherapy and newer radiotherapy equipment are coming into the picture. Now, the radiotherapy equipment uses treatment planning by conventional computers and things like that. Now, this one gives you a much more accurate version of treatment planning, and therefore the therapy is highly targeted, and hence peripheral radiation is avoided, and only the tissues that are bombarded are precisely the cancerous tumors and nowhere else. Again, there are some companies, as you can see, Google DeepMind Health is helping people in Los Angeles to actually put together. The beta projects are going on, and I would suggest you keep track of these technologies so that in the next 3 to 5 years, when they become operational, you are conversant with it. Now, this is a very interesting thing, just called personalized medicine. What's happening is that it is recognized that each of us is unique. And therefore, each of us has his own genetic profile. He's got his own health profile. He's got everything which is unique to himself. Now, how does one provide personal treatment? One takes all personal parameters, feeds it into an AI engine, and what it does is it develops a personal health plan for you. Now, this is becoming a very big business and a very big area of growth. Please watch this space, because I think this is going to become very critical in the years as we go on. Now, in preventive medicine, how do we change behavior? What does happen is that some of the newer concepts in machine learning help us to change our behavior and modify our behavior to either prevent a disease or take care of the disease while we are experiencing it. Now, you can see that many of us have learned from doctors. Yes? Okay. Yes?
You have 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there is a company called Somatics that is actually doing a lot of good work in this area. Now, this drug discovery and manufacturing is going to again become very critical, because it is going to completely revolutionize the drug delivery process with newer sequencing and alternate paths and newer molecules that can be identified by this. Again, Microsoft is part of the major team that's helping to build this product. Clinical trials is another area where massive amounts of data is crunched, and diagnostics based on this clinical trials have become very important. Just as an aside, the AI has been very instrumental in designing all the new drugs that have been used for COVID therapies. Thank you very much. I would like to acknowledge all these institutions, and it will be very good if you can go to some of these websites, and a lot of the information which I have discussed with you are covered in some of the articles in all of this. And I would like to thank all my teachers who have helped me out over the years to understand these technologies. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Engineer Ramnath, for this presentation talking about artificial intelligence with management for medical devices. And thank you for all speakers as well. Now I have the pleasure to open the floor for questions. So we have our four distinguished speakers. Please, you can ask your questions or send it on the discussion forum, and then I'm going to read it for you. Or otherwise, if you would like to unmute and say your question. So if you have any question from the audience, please come forward, or even from the speakers as well. Okay, can I ask one question for Engineer Ramnath before
Yes.
we get the audience ready? في أحد عنده
Yes.
سؤال؟
Yep.
Okay, I would like to know, because now this seems to be the era of artificial intelligence, and it is going very far, especially in clinical field, and bioengineering is one of these fields. I would like to know what are the situation for clinical engineering compared to other area, because now we are, as you mentioned, Watson, for example, we are using it in clinical services for diagnosis. We have artificial intelligence for predictions. I would like to know how far in bioengineering we are in the era of artificial intelligence.
I think in the next era, I think there will be no engineering maintenance the way we know it. I do believe that most of the maintenance will be remote. Most of the maintenance will be people by sitting off-site. They will not go anywhere near the machines at all. I think the next time there will be a small computer in the biomedical engineering department which will connect to all these systems, and more than doing maintenance, what it will do is calibration every morning. Okay, and just make sure that all the systems are working. That's all. There'll be no such thing as preventive maintenance in the future. I do not believe that kind of maintenance will exist, but it will be running a series of self checks and calibration to ensure that the machines are running properly. At least this is what I believe that will be the major change on clinical engineering. So they have to know how to run these checks, and they have to do it remotely. They need not have access to machines. Did you hear me? Best the helps the body has been proved. The physician
moving more at least 60 type of or far, I would say, remote the biomedical engineer management itself. Know how maintenance engineers coming more monitoring.
Thank you. I agree with you. Urging all biomedical those who are that this as one of the said the is going to be artificial. Any other questions?
Can I have a comment?
Please.
I think maintenance, but the role of engineers.
Yes, we can hear you.
The role of clinical, the issue of maintenance. I think you have the issue. You have the issue of the R&D patient interface. So that aspect really a lot of development that we intelligent technologies and so on. What's of clinical engineering? Just a quick comment. The issue of hospital assessment, which is just soaring up because of the issue of COVID. And this is also a very important role for clinical engineers. A lot of things. And zooming in on intelligence, I think we're missing a lot.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is a valuable comment. And I think this is the same also in discussion. So this is Mr. Talal. Thank you for your valuable comments. And I think, yes, this is going on with the same findings that we have heard from our distinguished speakers today. So if we have any other question or comments for our speakers, please, well, you are welcome.
Okay, let me just end this session. I would like to thank all our valuable and guest speakers today for their presentation, which is up to date biomedical engineering services as well. I would like to send some messages to our audience, if you allowed me to speak in Arabic as well for them. اخواني الطلبه والمهندسين والفنيين اللي معانا الحضور هذه، اشكركم شكرا جزيلا على هذا الحضور، لانه حضوركم هو الأساس لتشجيعنا لعمل المزيد والمزيد من المؤتمرات والجلسات وورش العمل. فزي ما قلنا في الافتتاحية، يمكن بعضكم ما كان موجود معنا، هذه الجلسة هو امتداد للمؤتمر الدولي للهندسة الطبية والإكلينيكية في الدول العربية اللي بدأناها بالرياض، ورحنا في دول في بيروت والقاهرة ودبي، واليوم نحن بنشارك مع المؤتمر الدولي لتشغيل الصيانة بجلسة واحدة. فدعمكم هو حضوركم لهذه الفعاليات. حضوركم للفعاليات هذه يعطينا نحن كمنظمين وكأكثر أن نقيم عدة فعاليات علمية. زي ما شايفين في المملكة العربية السعودية في المنطقة كلها لم يعد هناك أي مؤتمر في تخصص الهندسة الطبية مع الأسف الشديد، وهذا يعود لأنه الإقبال له ضعيف، ويمكن وهذا واحد من الأسباب. لكن نتمنى أنه يكون في المستقبل في عندنا فعاليات قادمة في هذا التخصص. والهندسة الطبية تعتبر واحدة من التخصصات الهامة والمهمة جدا في الرعاية الصحية، والرعاية الصحية بتتطور تطور كبير جدا، وبالتالي خدمة الهندسة الطبية والإكلينيكية المفروض تواكب هذا التطور وحتى نواكب هذا التطور لازم نحن نشارك في حضور هذه الفعاليات. والفعاليات هذه مهمة لأنه حضور 20 دقيقة أو 15 دقيقة لخبير ومتخصص في المجال ويعطي لكم يعني خلاصة دراساته وجهده في دقائق معدودة. فأشكر للجميع حضوركم هذا الفعالية وهذه الجلسة، ونتمنى بإذن الله تعالى أن نلتقي في فعاليات أخرى قريبا في مجال الهندسة الطبية. وإحنا كذلك أنا أدعوكم أنه نحن في المملكة السعودية ما عندنا جهة يعني نرجع لها سوى الجمعية العلمية السعودية للهندسة الطبية. المفترض الجمعية هذه يعني تصيروا أعضاء فيها، والجمعية تفعل بطريقة أفضل إن شاء الله، وهي التي تعطينا هذه الدورات والتدريبات وورش العمل والفعاليات العلمية. أشكر لكم جميعا حضوركم، وأشكر زملائي المتحدثين. I would like to thank Engineer Ram, Engineer Malik, Bassam, دكتور أحمد على حضوركم ومشاركتنا هذه الجلسة. شكرا لكم جميعا. Thank you very much.
شكرا.